Hello. Welcome back to the Space Explored podcast. I'm your friend Jared. I'm here with Seth. Today we're going to talk about Perseverance finding an ancient riverbed. SpaceX gets a new GM for Starbase. Rocket Lab. There's just a whole bunch of Rocket Lab news, so we'll get into that a little bit later. And there's a new commercial space station player out there. That's all coming up in episode 59.
Hey Jared, how's it going?
Hey man, what's going on? It's been a long time here, and we've been on a hiatus.
I'm like, it's only been a few weeks, and then I checked the YouTube channel because we did it's been so long since that we've done a podcast that we've redone our logo and the website design.
That's pretty bad, man.
So
That's pretty bad. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
I went to YouTube to update the logo, and I'm like, it's been 3 months. We need to start this back up again.
Yeah, for sure.
How's it going, everyone? If you've listened to us in the past, I'm Seth Kurkowski, editor-in-chief of Space Explored, and with me is Jared Sanders, our YouTuber, and we've been on a hiatus. We have some great news over the last few weeks. I mean, let's recap the last 3 months real quick. Starship launched. Starship didn't launch. Starship blew up. Rumors of Starship launching again. Starship didn't launch in those rumored timelines. Starship got sued. FAA got sued over Starship. How much more Starship stuff can we...
Well, I mean, to be fair, I will say this, to be fair to the audience, and, I do apologize for being MIA with everybody, for our team being MIA, but to be fair, I mean, it literally would have been just like Starship every week, almost sort of like how it was with Artemis, where it was just like Artemis for 2 months straight, and it got a little bit boring, a little bit vanilla, so, so I'll use that as the excuse.
Yeah, there a couple other things. Yeah, I mean, we had, we'll talk about some news that happened in the past month later in this episode that kind of popped up because it kind of came back this week, actually yesterday, with the news. So we have a couple of stories we're going to do a little bit differently, where I'm going to read off a little snippet of the news before we discuss it, just kind of to save it. And 30-minute runtime. We can do it, right?
Yes.
30 minutes?
Yep.
Right? Yeah, we're not going to do 30 minutes. Okay. So first up this week is
30 and counting.
Yeah, it would be like Peter McKinnon with his 5-minute, episodes, and just
put the clock up.
Doesn't even get through this intro before he gets to his 5 minutes. All right.
Yeah.
So Perseverance, in the latest images released by NASA from the agency's Perseverance rover, they show a potential riverbed based on the rocks left over. According to NASA, it looks as if this could have been formed from the deepest, fastest flowing river. I haven't read these out loud since I typed them. I probably should have done that. NASA looks, some of these sentences are not great. It looks as if this could have been the deepest and fastest flowing river so far found on the red planet. Jezero Crater is Perseverance's landing spot, of course, and was believed to once be a large lake with many rivers, and is prime location for potential life. So this came out, it was like last Thursday, I think, and it's a riverbed. Like, it looks like a riverbed, a dried up riverbed here in the air on Earth, and it's about time for Mars.
Yeah, it looks cool.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. Like, a lot of these things, of course, Perseverance's whole mission is to actually try to find life on there, and it's, I don't know, every time it's like, maybe we're getting a step closer to potentially, possibly, maybe finding the possible existence of possible life.
Yeah, or at least the historic events that led to life at one point, right? This is, this is a cool discovery, right?
Yeah, this is, it proves the fact that they did land at a crater that did have rivers.
Yep, they did not miss.
So that was kind of the whole point of Jezero Crater, was that there was going to be, like I said, supposed to be a lake, and it was supposed to have a bunch of rivers, and I think they're going through, right now they're going around a river delta-like area, so I think we expected them to find this.
Yeah.
Always cool to see more news of Perseverance. Also, Ingenuity has flown 50 times, I think, or something.
Wow.
I can't remember what the number is. Is it 50 or 25? I think it's 50. It's been flying for 2 years now.
That's so crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, I mean, I still find it, anytime there's an update, that it's insane that it's still out there working, functional, and it's reporting things like it should be. So I do find that really fascinating, and that's always cool. And just goes to show like the work they put in is actually going to pay off.
Yeah, I did the math on like because it's always funny when JPL does missions because they always outlive. Like they give them like such a conservative lifespan, and then they outlive it by like 10 times. So like I went through like all of JPL's or all the Mars rovers, which are all pretty much built by JPL, and like what was their operation, like their expected lifetime, and then what was their operational lifetime, and like what was that percentage more. And I'm pretty sure Ingenuity is going to take it wins on its month-long expected lifetime to being operational for 2 years.
That's so crazy. Can they please come down here and like build our batteries, and just like everyday like camera batteries. Like we don't even have to get into electric cars. Let's just do like regular batteries. Like because to not have to switch out a battery for a couple of years would be awesome.
Yeah, and it both. Yeah, so. I think the only one that was like really good also was like what was it? Sojourner was like only supposed to last a couple days and it lasted a couple weeks, I think, or something.
Crazy, man.
Like so like the percentage of how much longer it is like it's insane. So yes, Ingenuity kind of like took the cake on that one for kind of being the best. So next up,
that's cool.
We have a new commercial space station player, which is this company was a little interesting. So Vast, a relatively new space company on the scene, announced plans earlier this month to build a free-flying commercial space station that will launch as soon as 2025, not 2030.
Yeah, that's pretty fast, man. I mean, we're halfway through 23 right now, so that's 18 months that they're sort of targeting there.
Yeah. The design would be much simpler than versions coming from Axiom or Sierra Space. Being just a single module that will fit inside a Falcon 9 fairing. The station named Haven 1 would be able to support a crew of 4 for up to 30 days at a time. The company has further plans to develop larger modules that would fit inside Starship and stations that can spin to create artificial gravity.
Nice.
Vast was not on my radar at all. I think I saw Davenport create I think he did an interview with a Vast member. I didn't actually read it. I just saw the headline and I had to try to find my Washington Post description. I was like, I don't know who this is. So I had to look up on the press release, and I think there was some other articles that came out on it. I'm like, who is this company? Turned out they bought Launcher.
Wow. Okay.
So they bought Launcher like a few months ago, and I totally missed that one as well. That was in February. And so Launcher, if you don't know who Launcher was, it was like a startup. It was kind of another Relativity, another Firefly. Like they were going to start up and build a small lift launcher to kind of compete in that market. And so they bought them up, and they got rid of the rocket, but they kept the engine development. And Launcher also had a space tug type product. So Vast, their goal is. By the way, founded by, I don't know, I didn't put the name in of who actually founded it. It's in the article somewhere, but he's a cryptocurrency billionaire. That's how he made his money. That's like kind of the first cryptocurrency, like billionaires kind of to make the space scene. So it's a little interesting to see that, and he's self-funding it too. Like that's how well he did on crypto. So they want to build a bunch of space stations, and
he's self-funding it until you find out it's fraudulent, and he's really just using everybody else's fake money.
As everything with crypto, you never know where the money actually is coming
from.
Yeah. So who knows? But so they bought Launcher. They kind of bought them for their. Apparently they were like they wanted them merge or like not merge, but like just cooperate. And so Max Hoyt, who's the CEO of Launcher, I hung out with him on a boat for a while, and we talked, and he's a really cool guy, and I met his family. And
okay, man, I see you. I see nice flex hanging out on a boat.
Yeah, he has a very harsh tongue. Like he will swear a lot. But he's a cool guy. So I do have a video on my YouTube channel, and I had to blur out. I think I had to bleep out a lot of swears. But so they were kind of like building. This. They wanted to kind of cooperate with their kind of businesses, and they kind of said like, well, why don't you just buy us instead? And then so they've kind of merged their workforces, and they're kind of going forward on taking that orbiter, space tug, and developing that into a space station.
Nice.
So it pretty much looks like a single module of the space station.
Yeah.
It's
like a micro station.
It makes sense. Yeah, it kind of makes sense as like the first step to commercial space stations. It's not like this massive structure from Sierra Space or Axiom or whatever.
Less risk.
But
less risk.
It's just a little like thing you dock with that just expands your habitability. So you're not spending a month inside Dragon.
Right.
So They obviously have a deal with SpaceX. Like, they're pretty straightforward on, like, this is launching on a Falcon 9, the next version launching on Starship. Everything's designed around those two rockets, and the crew's launching on Dragon. Although, if it can launch on Dragon, if the Dragon can dock with it, then Starliner can dock with it. If Starliner can dock with it, then Sierra Space's Dream Chaser can dock with it, because it's all the same docking adapter, the international docking adapter. Reason why they called it the international docking adapter. Anyone can use it. So I don't know if they're just going to, like, lock down it to SpaceX, but that's kind of like how they partner with at the moment. So it looks like it's pretty well, like, established. So
nice.
Now everything in the world, like, Axiom is building their first module that's going to launch in 2025, and they had a much earlier date for their launch, and that's slipped to the right to be 2025. So everything in the space industry, first date you give
doesn't mean anything.
Like, I would expect this probably to
it's
launch.
That's like a save the date invitation.
Yeah, and even save the date invitations are a little more concrete than spaceflight save the dates. I think it's like they even put a month in there. I think it was like September or August.
Yeah.
2025. Yeah, I would be shocked if it launched in that date. It'll probably be 2026 because they're just still developing it. So, but that could be the first the first free flying commercial space station.
Nice.
So
yeah, that'd be cool.
Will obviously be attached to ISS, but that's going to be free flying right away, which is super cool.
Nice.
All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about, next company, Rocket Lab, is going to be a prevalent topic on this show. For this topic, our main topic, and then future topics. So, Rocket Lab began last week launching NASA's second Tropics mission. The first one, of course, failed on an Astro launch last year. The payloads will study forming tropical storms and hurricanes. My gosh, I should read these out loud before I type them. The payloads will study forming tropical storms and hurricanes as much faster than before, providing better models for determining where these storms will go. Of course, for two of us that have lived in Florida, we appreciate that.
Yes.
Later in the week, Rocket Lab hosted its 2023 first quarter earnings call, where the company stated that it will attempt to launch 15 Electron rockets this year between its orbital and in future hypersonic mission profiles. In 2024, the company hopes to be able to launch 20 Electrons. Rocket Lab is already the second most launching company in the United States, but is still miles behind SpaceX, who's attempting to launch 100 Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy rockets this year. I have said it before, and I'll say it again. Rocket Lab, this is Rocket Lab's year. This is the year for them to kind of have their breakout, with double-digit missions, and then just kind of push on out there, because you have Electron, which is, of course, launching the SmallSat missions orbital. You now have HASTE, which came out last month, which is hypersonic something test Electron, something like that. It's pretty much an Electron that they're going to fly into a hypersonic suborbital trajectory. So instead of it going out in space, they're just going to kind of fly through the atmosphere, and it's pretty much for DoD testing.
Nice.
And some high level, some really crazy research labs probably will use that kind of stuff, and that is very much needed right now. That's kind of like with Virgin Orbit going bankrupt, which also, Virgin Orbit went bankrupt, by the way.
Yeah, it's the last time we were here. I think you called that. I think you called both of these.
Yeah, and I was a little more shocked on Virgin Orbit. I thought Richard Branson would fund it a little bit longer, but he pulled out a lot sooner than I thought it would. But
he's over it.
So Virgin, there's a whole plan. I think, what day is it today? Is today the 15th or today the
16th?
16th. Okay, so yesterday was the deadline for Rocket Lab having formal proposal. Virgin Orbit having formal proposals on purchases. So we should see soon about whether or not what comes out of that. So there's a lot of speculation that Virgin Orbit will turn into a hypersonic testbed. That's what happened to Stratolaunch. If you remember Stratolaunch, with their massive plane out there in a Mojave Desert. So they've turned into a hypersonic kind of research company. And so Electron, or Rocket Lab, being the pretty much leaders they are in the industry next to SpaceX, has seen that opening and has turned their Electron rocket into a hypersonic test bed.
That's cool.
And so between those two missions, they're going to launch hopefully 15 Electrons this year. And all those hypersonics, though, are also going to come out of Wallops. So
Yep.
maybe I'll see one and not just spend 2 weeks in Chicoteague Island.
Hopefully it'll be in a warmer time.
Yeah,
and you
get my wheels stolen.
You won't lose your rims on your car.
Yeah, I won't lose my rims. So, yeah, so I feel bad for the Rocket Lab PR person who probably sees their stuff every time I bring it up. Like, yeah, I lost my wheels. It had nothing to do with the Rocket Lab, all to do with my stupid mistake. So they're just keep on growing. They keep on going. They have I think sometime this week or next week they're going to be launching the next Tropics mission. And they're growing.
Yeah, their business model's solid. It's and obviously we're going to get into this in a few minutes, but like in this overcrowded, space, they seem to have their eyesight on clear-cut achievable goals.
Mm-hmm. They went into their SPAC as a profitable, I don't know if they're actually profitable, but with a sound business source of revenue, and they went public. They've seen a huge decline in their stock price since they went public, but they went public in, 2019, 2020? Everyone's down. So it doesn't really matter that much. They still have their heads well above water compared to other companies at the moment. So, we'll talk about that more later in the episode. So next up, Kathy Leaders joins SpaceX as the GM of Starbase. According to the sources at CNBC, Kathy Leaders, the former assistant associate administrator at NASA, has joined SpaceX just 1 month after her retirement from the agency. Sources state that she will serve as a GM at SpaceX's Starbase facility, the site of the development of the company's Starship rocket and NASA's human landing system. Leaders was in a pivotal position at NASA during SpaceX and Boeing's selection for both the Commercial Crew Program and SpaceX's human landing system contracts. It's not uncommon for senior-level NASA officials to move from public to private sectors. However, there are laws barring lower-level NASA employees from doing the same.
Interesting.
So, CNBC came out yesterday that they had sources saying that Kathy joined SpaceX and she'll be a GM down there at Starbase, which is great for SpaceX, great for her. I mean, she was working, public sector and a public sector salary. Now she's working private sector salary. So, huge, she's spent her years, many, many, many years at NASA, and so she kind of deserves that win moving there. However, there is some concern about, whether or not this should be allowed. There's SpaceX, when they started, there was a huge issue with, I'm trying to think, it's a Kuiper, I think it was the company, or there was another, pretty much the first idea, the company that wanted to be SpaceX but failed. They got a contract for, I think it was a commercial resupply contract, and there was pretty much a rotating door of senior executives at NASA and the company just going round and round. So obviously, there was some concern whether or not there was some corruption in that contract decision, and so now we're seeing this is the second NASA. More than that, actually. I think there's been at least 2 associate administrator level positions of NASA. We had Gersmeyer, who was actually Kathy's predecessor in the position. So he moved to SpaceX as a VP, and now Kathy's moved on to SpaceX as a GM down there at Starbase. So while there's a lot of concern that lower level employees can't do the same. They have to wait a year or 2 years before they can even get a job in any sort of position that would be similar to what they did at NASA. I think that kind of makes sense versus senior level positions. While I think senior levels has a bigger issue with contracts because she pretty much led the way for SpaceX to get these contracts.
Yep.
Like she developed Commercial Crew Program with SpaceX, then she moved on to manage the Human Spaceflight Directorate, which then gave the contract, helped give the contract to Starship for HLS, and then continued expanding the contract with SpaceX for Commercial Crew Program and commercial resupply. That's a lot of money moving between companies. She was making though close to probably $160,000+ a year. Like she's not. When you make it senior level executive, you're making good money, even in the government. The low level engineers are not making that much.
Right.
They're public sector. You're you're not making crazy amounts of money. While you could be making crazy amounts of money moving to the private sector. So there is actually a pretty good benefit
and you get
for
stock
them
options
to,
and all kinds of other
there's a much bigger benefit, I think, for lower level employees than senior level employees. It's just more advantageous for the company on that end on senior level rather than lower level. So there's concerns on both. Should neither of them should we just wipe out I think it's called the Hatch Act, just wipe that clear and just not worry about it and just probably have a bunch of corruption, or just lock it down to no one can do it, and then you have all these really talented people who then have to wait years before they can get jobs? I don't know. It would be
it's tough, man. You obviously, you see this in the tech world a lot, right? There's like all kinds of clauses and NDAs and different non-compete clauses that you have to deal with, if you're jumping from like Google to Apple or whatever. So and that's obviously private to private. But it's I don't know, man. It's interesting. And I think with this, they have to also be very careful with, there's proprietary stuff. Sometimes maybe it might be military involved or other government, sectors.
Lots of proprietary, especially someone at her level working with not just SpaceX, but all of SpaceX.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a ton of red tape that, has to be probably, looked at, so.
Yeah, it's a touchy subject no matter which way you go. So, but that's the move, and good thing for Kathy because we don't lose her. She stays in the industry. She's a very talented and very influential person that can get things done. So, always happy to see her stick around. So,
yeah, it's just another classic SpaceX move, right? Gobble up great talent.
Yeah, pretty much.
How that's how they've always built it.
Yeah, pretty much. So we're gonna take a short break, and then we're going to a little bit more of a deep dive topic next, and I'll be back. All right, and we're back with our main deep dive topic, which again, like I said, is Rocket Lab. We're back to Rocket Lab because Rocket Lab snatched up another contract from another provider. So we talked about Tropics before. That was originally on Astra. Then Astra pretty much ended his Rocket 3 program after that failure and moved on to Rocket 4, which is not part of NASA's Venture Class launch contract. And so NASA went elsewhere. They had to look elsewhere, and they went with Rocket Lab because Rocket Lab, I guess, if I was NASA, I just lost 2 payloads on a mission, and I have 4 more, and it's really, really important that these 4 make it to
really
orbit.
Expensive.
They're not. They're not really that expensive. I just think they've reached their budget. They can't build more. It was really awesome to have 6 because you'd have more, but you needed at least 4 for the constellation, and now you're only down to 4. So going to Rocket Lab, much more successful and much more long-term history with NASA, or at least with launching. That's a pretty safe option.
Yeah.
So Rocket Lab has gained yet another contract from the hands of a fellow SmallSat launcher. This time, a group of NASA SmallSats that will form the agency's first swarm constellation in space, named Starling, not Starlink, not Starship, not Starbase, Starling.
Starling.
Not Starliner. Starling. I put that in an article I wrote. If you're using text-to-speech, because I use text-to-speech a lot to listen to my articles, it sounds the same thing as Starlink. I'm like, no, it's not Starlink, it's Starling. It will test the ability to use a swarm of satellites in orbit rather than traditional independent satellites that share an orbit. This will reduce the workload on ground operators and potentially simplify constellation management. NASA has future plans to use swarm technology on larger constellations. And I have to double check here just to make sure I know what company it came from before.
So we're going to have another train up there. This is going to be the Starling train, not the Starlink train.
Yeah. So this company, where did I...
More space junk.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's only a constellation, I think, of like 4 satellites up there, and they're testing swarm versus...
For now.
Yeah, they're testing a swarm satellite. The next one's like 6 satellites.
Yeah.
It's testing pretty much the ability to, rather than having people on the ground figure out what to control each individual satellite independently, you send it to the constellation as a whole, and it figures out, like, okay, how's the best way of handling this command you've sent, rather than you're just saying, okay, this satellite, change your orbit by this direction, or this satellite, take this photo. You're just like, hey, constellation, please take this photo.
Yep.
And so it's kind of a little bit cooler way of handling this. And this is the contract that they took was originally on Firefly. So if you don't, so Firefly, like I said, we have also talked about Launcher this episode and other companies. Firefly has the Alpha rocket, and they have launched twice out of Vandenberg. The first one failed shortly after launch, and the second one made it to orbit, but just barely. It underperformed, and so all the payloads on board that deorbited after about a week. So they didn't have enough altitude to kind of stay up there. So there's more delays coming from Firefly. Again, we're seeing a big kind of like, I think we're seeing a year ago, you would have looked at the industry and be like, man, it's booming. Like we have all these new companies coming on board and all going to be launching within the next year or two. And everything's great. There's going to be so many options to launch a SmallSat. And now we're looking at like, okay, Virgin Orbit is pretty much going to be, there's a chance that Virgin Orbit reemerges, but its business model, even when it started, was not sustainable. So it will probably either be defunct or will pivot into hypersonic, or just kind of be like just broken up.
Yeah, or
you
bought
have
up by another
Astra.
company.
Yeah, Astra's moving into a larger rocket. They're no longer launching their small Rocket 3. Rocket 4 is a much larger, much capable more rocket. Still, I think it's still considered a SmallSat launcher. Launcher got bought up, so Launcher's no longer building a rocket. You have Firefly with Alpha, and they're having some delays. I think they want to launch. They have a launch supposedly this month, but I've heard nothing about it. So I don't think we really have an idea of when the next Firefly launch is going to be. Sometime probably this year. But this, I think, kind of like the reason why NASA moved off of it was because they saw something. They see Alpha. They're still launching, but they must have seen some sort of delay in their launch time from Firefly and went, we need this to go up sooner rather than later. So they moved it off of it. And then we're seeing, you have Relativity launched the Terran 1, and that was a widely successful mission. It made it into MECO, it made it almost all the way to stage separation, and then it had a failure, which is much better. That was probably the most graceful failure of a first launch from a SmallSat mission. Rather than, Astra's had some dramatic failures, Firefly had a dramatic failure, SpaceX had its dramatic failures. Relativity's was relatively graceful and actually relatively surprising to a lot of people. So, but they're moving on to Terran Arc, which is going to be a medium to heavy lift. It's going to compete with SpaceX's Falcon 9. That's no longer going to be, a SmallSat launcher, and we don't know how Terran 1's going to turn out. So now we're looking pretty much at Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab's pretty much the big player right now in SmallSat launches, and they're pretty much going to become, in my opinion, I think they're going to become the SpaceX SmallSat launches, where the majority goes with Rocket Lab, and you might see some one-off stuff from a couple of companies, but they have kind of cemented themselves right now with NASA as the better option for all of these missions. We've seen it twice now in the past, few months, that Rocket Lab or NASA needs to move elsewhere, and they go to the Rocket Lab. So
it's good that there's options out there, but
there were a lot more options last year than there are this year.
Yes, maybe more, but maybe not, as quality. I think and this is probably going to come up in here in just a second, but, as things start to scale back, the quality has to go up. It goes up, right? It just naturally, the cream rises to the top, So
let's just go right into our, we'll just throw right into our hot take and continue this discussion.
Give it to us.
My pretty much my opinion and hot take is that we're going to see a collapse of the SmallSat launch market.
Yeah.
Even Peter Beck. Peter Beck sees it too, and that's why he's tailoring. He's really pushing hard on Electron and having multiple launch platforms and reusability and launching. And I feel like some people are going to be like, "Well, you're a Rocket Lab fan," but I'm like, "Well, I spent a lot of time with Peter Beck, and he's a really freaking smart person. He knows what he's talking about. So when he says something, I'm like, yeah, he's probably right. And just you look at the rest of the industry, is where it's going. It's really hard to compete with a company that's firing on all cylinders and you're trying to still get your engine started.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally for some companies and others figuratively for other companies.
Right.
So it's there's so many more companies that have announced that we've seen nothing from them since then. Vector restarted. Vector from years and years and years ago. was a small sat launcher, like the original. Like it was before Rocket Lab even got up and started. Well, up and like going at full speed. Then they were kind of like shady, and I didn't know what they were. And then they've kind of like come back out of stealth mode with a new CEO. We've seen nothing from them. You have Phantom Space, which really poorly named because it's the original CEO from the Vector that everyone thought was really shady. So creating a company called Phantom, probably not a great PR move by that guy.
Yeah,
they've had apparently they have contracts. Apparently they're getting leasing land at Cape Canaveral. A few weeks ago, or a month ago, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station announced new companies that are going to be leasing launch pads, and they were on the list. There was a bunch of different companies like that on the list. Like I think it was you had Firefly, and I think you had Phantom, and a few other companies. I think even was a launcher on one. I don't know. I had to go back through and check, but which looks great. But like when you're looking at the market, is like, okay, how can they compete in a market that's already just, if Rocket Lab can launch multiple times a month, like I think we've gone past the point where anyone who says they're going to try to launch once a day, unless you're Starship and you need to launch multiple times a day because you're refilling a rocket that's going to Mars, like that's pretty much, I think no one believes that anymore. Like no one really believes that multiple launches per day is actually probably ever going to happen, because it doesn't look like the market is going to support that. What?
Not anytime soon.
Yeah, or anytime soon. I mean, it's just whether or not the market can actually support it, whether or not orbit can actually support it. Like, can we actually have that many satellites in orbit? Like, that's always.
Well, people said that about the sky.
Yeah, how many planes can we have? And I think we get to that concern where like, we're never going to actually meet that because we actually don't need that.
Yeah, you don't. At some point, right? It's diminishing returns. You don't actually need it.
Yeah. And I think that's like, a valid point for orbit. Like the area of the sky that we talked about before is much, much larger in orbit because you have multiple orbits and it's just a larger sphere. So you have much more room to be in. But we're seeing some concern already. Like Rocket Lab has stated that they have to delay some launches because of, Starlink's being overhead. It's, and China's coming out with a couple. They want to build their own constellation, a couple thousand satellites. And Russia wants to build one, and Europe wants to build one, and NASA wants to build stuff, and like the DoD wants to have a bunch of different constellations up there instead of having one satellite. Yeah, like everyone wants to now build these satellites, and because land is physical, like you can go you can physically go to an island, plant a flag, and put people there, and be like, do not come here. Orbit is a little bit harder. You can't put you could put a space station up there, man it with some Marines, and be like, don't come into our orbit. But like
that sounds like a terrible idea.
That's really impractical. It's very, very impractical.
Sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's much, much harder to like claim stake a claim to an orbital inclination. So like having more and more orbits, it's just like, I think eventually we're going to get to the point where like, hey, does every company need to have its own constellation, or like does one company have a constellation that you lease space on the payloads on? Because some companies look at doing that rather than building their own satellites. But yeah, like that's kind of like, it's just, I think we're not going to see the small sat market grow to the point where I think a lot of us has kind of envisioned it would be, like later this month.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a finite amount of space, no pun intended, but you're right. At some point, it's just going to be silly, and it just needs to be like, come on, can we share these orbits, or can we share the same, network of satellites, or can we, is there a way to double up the tech on the satellite to launch it, so that it occupies the same space, but you're getting twice as much equipment out of, one satellite. But yeah, at some point, it's just going to be ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's already ridiculous. Like it's basically one a week now with at least one a week with SpaceX, and they're going for 100, so that's 2 a week. So it's already a little ridiculous.
Yeah. So let me the next time, I think we've talked about Astra a lot on the stream. I've always said I don't think they're going to survive. Let's talk about their most Q1 earnings here. So Astra burned $45 million in Q1. And they currently have $62 million in cash on hand. or cash equivalents on hand.
It doesn't seem like a lot, though.
Yeah, it does not seem like a lot. This is like a similar state that Virgin Orbit was in end of last year. Best case scenario is that they'll burn through $35 million in the Q2 and maybe make a few $1 million off some engine sales that they have. And I pretty much just asked the question into our Slack channel, how is this company still around? It's one of these companies that like they got an extension on their NASDAQ, or is it NASDAQ? Yeah, it's NASDAQ delisting warning for another like 6 months. So they could save themselves that way from being delisted.
I still feel like somebody's going to buy them out at some point.
A buyout would totally make sense because they don't. Yeah. It's not like they don't have anything valuable. Like they have
right.
They have a lot of engineering talent. They have a lot of hardware talent.
Well, they have the time, man. Just the R&D, the time. Like that's the key ingredient to a lot of these companies. It's just like you said earlier. Like how are you supposed to compete when someone like SpaceX is firing on all cylinders, but you're just trying to get your first rocket off the ground. So buying a company like them, they've had success at some point. They have achievable things, and they have a ton of R&D that they've already put in.
And they've already built. They spent years developing their Rocket 3 rocket vehicle. And so it was really it was concerning to me when they looked at that last failure of their last launch and said, we need to completely redo our rocket system. I'm like, okay, you're already cash strapped, like as it is. Like you're already at that point. I think they were getting close to the less than $1 mark. Like you're getting to the point where you have to look for outside funding, because you're not going to be getting, obviously not going to be making a lot of money off the stock market at this point. And you have a rocket that's just like almost there. From the outside, it looks like it's almost there. So whatever they saw on the inside is that they have to completely redevelop not just their rocket, but their whole launch system as a whole, their whole company. They've had to redo it. Like, okay, so what were you doing before that was so bad that you are going to risk this? You have to burn this amount of cash to fix it.
Like, what have you guys been doing all this time?
Yeah. I mean, they've been building the Rocket 3. They've been developing Rocket 3. It's just like
right. No,
what systems did you have in place that were just not going to be successful that you found out that you did? So that's a little concerning whether or not like that company. I mean, just what comes out of it. I think Rocket 4 is supposed to launch sometime this year. Maybe they'll find outside funding. Maybe maybe they'll just be like SpaceX and just have like money, just have just enough money to launch Rocket 4. Because in the rocket industry, you have to successfully launch the rocket to get paid. Like you can't.
Right.
You don't get paid up front. You get paid.
It's not the tech industry where I have this idea.
Yeah,
pay me now.
Well, yeah, it is. It has been the tech industry for the past decade.
Right.
I had this idea.
That makes it weird.
Hundreds of millions of dollars, but now it's to the point where, we're not seeing that sort of investment anymore. We're not seeing, just billionaires come in and be like, hey, like here's a bunch of money for a company, like I'm just gonna invest it. Like we're not seeing the investment anymore, which is why, Virgin Orbit kind of defunct it, was because they needed money, and Richard Branson went, no, like find money elsewhere. Like you can't. I'm out. So that's going to be happening a lot. I think a lot more people are going away from the launches. However, we're seeing a lot more space systems. Kind of companies pop up and be successful and investing in companies that want to deal with space junk or wanting to build systems for satellite buses or solar panels, or the new company called Nuvu that came out stealth mode this month. They want to do a LiDAR 3D mapping of the entire world because the energy density and sensors on LiDAR have, between being able to have a satellite bus that can produce enough power and a LiDAR sensor that can suck as little power as possible, you can now actually have a LiDAR-based.
That's cool.
Privately funded LiDAR-based satellite versus the ones that are up there that are all NASA built and are massive. So I think like IceSat 2 has a LiDAR sensor on it, but that's like a very specifically built satellite. Nuvu is going to be building like a constellation of 20 to do like a 3D map of the entire world every single year. So that's super cool. Like that's where I think we're going to see the growth in the industry, is kind of on the market side, the customer side versus the launchers. Like I think we've pretty much set in our ways where SpaceX and one other is Richard Peter Beck. This is what Peter Beck stated in an interview like a few weeks ago that he thinks that SpaceX is going to be the king, and then like one or two people are going to be able to compete with SpaceX.
Yep.
And that medium to heavy launch like area. So who is that going to be? Rocket Lab wants to be it with Neutron. New Glenn wants to be it. ULA wants to be it. Who else out there? Relativity wants to be in there. Yep. Europe wants to be in there. China, Russia,
Blue
India
Origin.
all want to. Blue Origin with New Glenn.
At some
I
point.
think I had New Glenn, not Blue Origin. So like there's a lot of people in there who wants to play in this medium launch game.
Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult to have all of them win. And equally, there's a good amount of people who want in on this small launch case. And I think it's only going to be a handful of people who can survive that too.
Yeah, there's the parallel industry right now. If anybody out there is sort of new to space, is to look at the streaming wars. This is kind of happening. This is exactly how it's playing out in like
more mergers.
TV.
Like was HBO and is
Discovery.
It HBO and Hulu?
It was Discovery. Disney just finished purchasing the other side of Hulu. So
That's
Hulu
right,
and Disney Plus is all going to be like merged together. Yeah, you're going to see that a lot more. So it's very similar. It's a very interesting parallel.
I wonder who Amazon's going to buy, because they're going to buy someone.
Yeah.
Netflix.
Yep.
Call them. It's not a tech podcast, but now it is.
That would be interesting.
I remember I made I guested on the 9 to 5 Mac podcast, and he asked me when what was it? He just said like, when do you think Apple Music Classical is going to come out? And I'm like, it's next week.
And it was
I don't know, dude.
There it was. Boom.
Like I'm just here to be the body. Like I don't know anything about Apple. I'm just a warm body for you to talk to at the moment. So
that's how I feel here.
So, that is this week's episode of the Space Report podcast. I think we went over in the 30 minutes.
We did.
I don't think we went over that much because we were at 22 minutes on our first recording, and we're at 20 minutes now. So
it was close.
There's some editing in there that we could probably get done.
Yeah, definitely.
So, thank you everyone for checking out with us. Make sure you head over to spaceexplorer.com. Check out our new logo, our new redesign. It's purple now. I'm wearing red still, but it's purple now.
Purpley.
Yeah. I spent way too much time with our social media manager for a tweet to talk about our... and then I just tweeted the meme where it's like, it's purple, like always has been. Like,
you didn't brand the purple? We didn't brand the purple. It should have been like, I don't know, SE purple or whatever.
SE purple?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a hex. I mean, we could. I don't know.
Well, yeah. But you got to brand it.
We're not big enough for that yet. So we actually had to redo. I just remembered the other day, I'm like, we should probably redo our store. Because we actually have a website. By the way, if you're interested, we have like a store. You can buy Space Explorer merch. It's just our logo on t-shirts. So buy at your own will. It's if you want it. But it's the old logo.
Please support.
So,
Please support.
If you want the old Space Explorer logo, if you want the helmets, like we have that on t-shirts. So we have that.
Well, now that can be vintage. That's going to be a throwback.
Yeah, I should actually go through and buy a shirt of all of them, the old stuff, and then have it redone. Inside trading. So check us out on the website. Check us out on social media. I'm on Twitter at Seth Kirk. Jared, you're on multiple places.
Yeah, anywhere on the line. At Hyperlight, HYPRLYTE.
And we actually, I just created a Discord server for Space Explorer. I don't know. I just start dropping the links in articles. So it's just me in there and a handful of other people. So I will put the link in the description if you want to join. It's really just me. If you just want to talk to me, I'm lonely. Please talk.
It's a direct line.
It's legit a direct line. There's no one else. It's like we have 100 members, but no one talks. So it's just me in there. Sometimes sending creating forum posts. So come by and check that out. And of course, you can listen to us on all the major streaming all the major and unmajor, because we're on smaller ones, podcasting platforms. What is it? Apple, Google, Spotify,
Apple, Google,
YouTube,
Stitcher.
I don't know.
Just another one. Yeah.
All the above.
Those are the major.
All the above. We're all there. So check us in. We'll be back. We will be back next week.
Yes, we're back.
Yes, we will. I will will it into existence. We will be back next week. All right. Have a good one.
Yep.